Good evening, everybody. Let's try to get everybody's attention. Good evening. Good to see you tonight. Thanks for coming out. In this is one of those. What is it? Dogwood winter. I lose track of what the winters are. Redbud winter. So glad you're with us tonight. And this event is sponsored by the 60 Plus Ministry of Central United Methodist Church. So this has actually been talked about for about 6 months or so-ish about providing this opportunity. And I'll introduce our speaker in a second. I did want to thank Brenda Reeder and Kara Sheets for all the snacks. So let's thank them. They wanted me to make sure that you knew in about a month there's going to be another event called Brunch and Bingo. Hopefully you can see that on a Wednesday at 11:30 on April 15th to celebrate your taxes being all completed. So you can put that on your calendar, and this will be a way for fellowship and have some fun together. Tonight I'm just going to give a brief introduction for our speaker. This actually came about sort of through a conversation about 6 months ago-ish or longer. Ron had actually invited, him and Karen invited Kate and I out to eat on a Friday night. And we were talking, and we ended up talking for several hours. And Karen, I learned more about her background, and we kept asking her questions. And I was like, oh, wow, I never knew that. That's really helpful. Tell us more. And so when we were thinking about events that might be helpful for all of us, Karen came to mind. So we just thank you for your willingness to come. Karen is the endowed professor and former chair of the Department of Preventive Medicine at UT Health Science Center. She graduated from UT, and she has her preventive medicine residency and a master's of public health from Johns Hopkins. She's board certified in both internal medicine and preventive medicine, and she conducts medical research. So in other words, you're not looking on the internet and you're hoping that the hyperlink is authentic. So you're going to have an opportunity to not only hear her presentation, but also at the very end have some question and answer. So without any further ado, let's give it up for Karen Johnson.
Well, good evening, everyone. Can you all hear me? Yes. Okay, fantastic. Well, I want to thank you for inviting me to speak. And as a physician, when you ask me to speak, I obviously speak about things I know more about than not. And I thought the topic of medical misinformation would be a really important one for me to talk about because it's so prevalent in our society today. So if you advance to the next slide, please. I did want to let you know I have no conflicts of interest, and the opinions and perspectives that are shared in this presentation are solely my own, and they don't necessarily reflect the views or policies or positions of any organization, employer, or affiliated group of mine. So next slide. Well, I think Scott already covered the points on this slide. I thought I'd tell you a little bit about myself, but he's already done that. The only thing I'll add to that is I am currently conducting medical research at UT, and my main focus is to try to help prevent disease and promote health. I've been doing that for the last 30 years, and I'm currently the PI of 2 NIH-funded grants. One is a weight loss grant, and the other one is a grant to figure out how to prevent bone loss when you lose weight. So those are currently ongoing right now. Next slide. Tonight I thought we would, and it's kind of hard for me to read being a blind person, so I'm going to kind of back up and read it off that if that's okay. Today, we're going to define what medical misinformation is. We're going to discuss ways that medical misinformation spreads and some of the tactics that people use to spread medical misinformation. I'm going to show you some interesting examples of misinformation, and I'm particularly going to talk about vaccines. because there's a lot of misinformation about vaccines going around. And then we'll talk a little bit about how to evaluate medical information. Next slide. All right, what is medical misinformation? It is false, inaccurate, or misleading information according to the best available science at the time. And we know that it spreads very easily through social media and very easily via search engine. And what we're seeing nowadays in the age of the internet is that it's spreading at the speed and at scale that we have never seen before. And it can often lead to mistrust of medical science, of medical professionals, and ultimately it can lead to medical hesitancy. And we know that medical hesitancy leads to the spread of disease and death, and I'm going to show you some examples of that tonight. And then I think the way we combat medical misinformation is we have to all be medically literate, and we have to use our critical thinking skills. Now, the picture you see on this slide is from a Facebook page where a health influencer is trying to tell their followers that onion water will cure every known disease on earth. We know from medical science that that's misinformation, that onion water does not cure disease. It probably won't hurt you if you take it, but it probably won't help you. And it's probably a waste of money to buy onion water from this health influencer. All right, next slide. All right, what are some common tactics that people who want to spread misinformation use? And I'm sorry if those are too light to see, but the first is conspiracy theories. So pick your boogeyman, okay? The boogeyman is the medical health profession, and a person trying to spread misinformation is going to say the medical health profession is the boogeyman. They're trying to trick you, the general public. They're going to lie to you, and they're going to cover up the truth. And instead of believing what the medical profession says, you should believe me and the misinformation that I want to communicate to you. They will often use fake experts who denigrate real experts. They will use the technique of selectivity. And what I mean by that is they often will pick a paper that supports their claim of misinformation that is sometimes even been discredited as false, and they won't tell you about all those other papers that don't support their claim of medical misinformation. So the selectivity is a common theme that's used, and I'll show you an example of that. They also often use impossible expectations, and vaccines are a real good example of that. They'll say, you shouldn't take vaccines because they're not 100% safe and 100% effective. But what they don't tell you is that there is not a medicine on earth that is 100% effective or 100% safe, okay? And so it's unrealistic to expect that vaccines potentially won't have some side effects, just like every other medicine we have. People who spread misinformation also use false logic, and they will jump to erroneous conclusions from that false logic. Next slide. Common misinformation is commonly spread when these people will set up professional websites, and they look very nice, those websites, but those websites will have false and misleading statements on it. They often use sensational headlines to draw you in as clickbait so that you'll be interested in what the website says. And they often include logos of established medical organizations like the AMA to promote your trust, when really they're communicating false information. They often use quotations on their websites, and they will alter quotations to change the meaning so that if you don't have the full quotation, you don't know what the full context of the meaning what the quote really meant, and it's really not a fair representation of what someone said. So that's very common. They will often use first-person experience. They'll have a person that says, such and such happened to me, and so you should be afraid of it because it might happen to you too. And it's often very difficult to discredit first-person experience, okay? Because it may or may not be true. It's anecdotal information. It may not apply to you. And they often use old images that they recirculate as if they're recent photos to make a point, when in fact they're old photos that have nothing to do with the medical misinformation point they're trying to make. All right, next slide. They often use misleading graphs, images, or diagrams, and they look official, but they don't really tell you the whole story. They often use visual cues. For example, a common one is they'll show a person wearing a white coat, holding a stethoscope, looking like they're a physician, and it's to promote your trust of their information. So don't be fooled by that white coat and that stethoscope. They will use cherry-picked statistics, and they'll use the cherry-picked statistics to support their medical misinformation claim, but they won't show you all the other statistics that discredit that information. So they don't show you the whole picture. So it's difficult for you to decide if that is indeed true. They often will create videos. They edit the videos to change meaning, and they often will include deep fake videos. They will have a person who looks like President Obama, let's say, saying something that they never actually indeed said. But that's very common for people who want to spread medical misinformation. They often will create colorful memes, which is a graphic or image, and typically they start out as jokes, and then people who don't know that they're a joke spread them and reshare them as if they were true. And I'll show you some examples of memes in this talk a little later on. Next slide. Okay, what's the most common thing we see nowadays? What's the most common topics that we see medical misinformation spread about? The number one is vaccines. That's the number one cause of medical misinformation. Other very common ones are about reproductive health or birth control, about communicable diseases, particularly COVID. We have a lot of misinformation about COVID, and I'll show you some examples of these. We have a lot of medical misinformation about smoking, and then we have a lot of medical misinformation about other medical treatments. Next slide. All right, this is an example of an ad that was put out by the tobacco industry in the 1930s, and it was designed to make you want to smoke, okay? And you see an image of a man. He looks like he's a physician. They tell you he's a physician. He's wearing a white coat, and there he is smoking a cigarette. And the subliminal message is, well, if it's okay for the doctor to smoke, it must be okay for me to smoke, for my health too. It's not okay to smoke. So please don't smoke. If you do smoke, please quit. It's probably one of the leading causes of preventable disease and death in our society, and it's incredibly harmful to you to smoke. All right, next slide. This is another ad put out by the tobacco company. I particularly enjoyed this ad. You have the doctor sitting at the pediatrician visit with the mother, and the ad says, more doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarettes. So they're trying to say this is a trusted source of medical information, and it's really okay to smoke. And if you do smoke, you need to smoke Camels. Please don't smoke. All right, next slide. All right, we'll fast forward a little bit. This is a health influencer from Facebook. And this particular health influencer was trying to convince their followers that apple cider vinegar could treat terminal brain cancer, okay? And this particular person fooled a lot of people into thinking that apple cider vinegar would cure brain cancer. I'm here to say that there is no scientific studies that suggest apple cider vinegar will treat your terminal brain cancer. So please, if you have that, don't stop your treatments that the doctor's giving you. If you want to drink apple cider vinegar, probably won't hurt you, but it's not going to cure your brain cancer. All right, next slide. I thought this was a particular interesting one. There is, on Facebook, there was a medical misinformation going around that the GLP-1 weight loss drugs like Ozempic contained lizard venom. Okay, is that the craziest thing you've ever heard? It caused lizard venom. And the reason that that started to spread online was that we know Gila monsters can go a long way, a long time without eating. And that's because their saliva contains a product that's a compound, chemical compound, similar to human GLP-1s, but is not human GLP-1. And so everybody started saying, well, it's the lizard venom that you're getting in Ozempic. It is not. It's human GLP-1 that you get in Ozempic. Next slide. All right. Who's ever heard that ivermectin treats COVID? Everybody heard that during the COVID pandemic? This was a very prevalent medical misinformation that was spread by multiple Facebook groups. And it got to the point in the pandemic where we had people rushing to Petco to purchase ivermectin. Ivermectin is a drug that is used by veterinarians to treat parasites in animals. It is not approved for human use. It has side effects. And it got to be so bad that people were running out of the stock of ivermectin during the pandemic when we had no effective treatments. And it got so bad that the FDA and state health departments and Merck, the drug manufacturers, came out with a statement that said, don't take ivermectin for COVID. It doesn't treat COVID. COVID is a virus. It's not a parasite. Since so many people started taking it, though, the medical profession said, well, we can find out if ivermectin does treat COVID. We'll do a rigorous randomized clinical trial and see if it treats COVID. And guess what? It is ineffective at treating COVID. Please don't take it for COVID. All right, next slide. Now, this is a meme I thought was kind of amusing in some ways. It is a picture of the U.S. House of Representatives, and it's depicting our elected officials as parasites. And this meme was used to promote fear about the COVID vaccine during the pandemic. And instead of taking the COVID vaccine, you should take ivermectin. So don't take ivermectin, take the COVID vaccine. It works. All right, next slide. This was the oldest meme I could find, and I thought this was a very interesting meme. In the early 1800s, Dr. Edward Jenner created a cowpox-derived smallpox vaccine that actually prevented people from getting smallpox. And they started giving this smallpox vaccine to people in the country. And then the anti-vaccine group came out with memes like that to scare people into not taking the vaccine. And in this picture, you can see the lady who's seated. She's getting her vaccine, and the people who are behind her have all just gotten their vaccine, and they're turning into cattle. And so the meme is that if you take the cowpox-derived smallpox vaccine, you'll turn into cattle. Obviously, that is medical misinformation to scare people from taking the vaccine. I do want to let you know that smallpox is an incredibly deadly disease. And in 18th century Europe, it was the leading cause of death. and it was estimated to have killed over 400,000 Europeans every year in the 18th century, and it's estimated to have killed over 300 million people in the 20th century. It's an incredibly deadly disease. Next slide. All right, this is another meme used about the current smallpox vaccine, the more modern one, not the cowpox-derived one. And in this meme, you can see death standing there, and the snake is a vaccine, and the mother is grabbing her baby up and running away, fleeing from the vaccine because it's scary and it's going to kill you if you take the vaccine. But I'm here to tell you that because of the smallpox vaccine, we have eradicated smallpox from the earth. Let me say that again. Because of the smallpox vaccine, we vaccinated people worldwide. We have eradicated smallpox from the earth, and we actually no longer have to give smallpox vaccinations anymore because nobody gets smallpox anymore. And the last known case of smallpox was in 1977 in Somalia, and we haven't had any smallpox since then because of the vaccine. All right, I did want to show you this because I thought this was particularly interesting. It's an article from the American Journal of Public Health, and these authors analyzed tweets about vaccines. And what they found, and they analyzed them from 2014 to 2017, and what they found when they did that analysis is that there were Russian trolls who were amplifying vaccine hesitancy by sending out, using Twitter bots and sending out these anti-vaccine messages by tweeting it to Americans. Okay, these Russians wanted the Americans to be sick. They wanted to scare you from taking vaccines, and so you would be sick. I thought that was incredibly interesting. All right, next slide. All right, let me just tell you some common misinformation about vaccines that I hear all the time. Number one is that vaccines cause autism. That is incorrect, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. That vaccines cause sudden infant death syndrome. Vaccines do not cause sudden infant death syndrome. Okay? Vaccine preventable diseases are just part of childhood, and it's better to have the disease and become immune than to become immune through the vaccine. That is incorrect. You will have many more side effects and potential adverse events if you get the disease, and you will have just as good of immunity if you get the vaccine. Okay? So the disease doesn't give you more immunity. All right? I don't need to get my child vaccinated because all other children around them are already immune, and that's the idea of herd immunity. Herd immunity is a great thing, but most of the time in herd immunity, we need a really high vaccination rate. Like for measles, they estimate that 95% of the population needs to have the vaccine before we hit herd immunity. So if you don't vaccinate your kid, what happens? We have a measles outbreak. What are we having right now? A measles outbreak in South Carolina, very near here. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Okay, next myth is, wait, can you go back? Back one slide. They're trying to go back. I think the next myth was that your child can get the disease from the vaccine. That's incorrect. Most of our vaccines now are inactive virus vaccines, and your child can't get the disease from the vaccine. And the last one that I hear echoed all the time by the anti-vaxxers is that vaccine wasn't tested for safety and effectiveness before the FDA approved it. That is absolutely 100% false. False, false, false. The manufacturers have to do extensive safety and effectiveness clinical trial testing and take that data to the FDA. The FDA reviews it and analyzes it for benefits and risk before they ever approve anything. So that last one is false. All right, next slide. We know, us public health types, that the most important public health interventions in history have been safe drinking water, okay? And we all take that one for granted, right? When I turn the tap on, it's safe to drink that water. It didn't used to be, because used to you went to the pump and you might pump out good water, or you might pump out water that had cholera in it, which is a very serious illness. So safe drinking water, and number 2 is immunizations. We know that vaccines have prevented millions and millions and millions of deaths and hospitalization, and it has saved us money in healthcare costs. So it is one of the most important public health interventions in history. Next slide. I'm going to show you some data because I'm a data geek, I guess. This is showing you the impact of vaccines during the last 70 years, and I'll walk you through it. The first column is the disease that we vaccinate against. The second column is the number of reported cases in the year in parentheses. And the third column is the number of reported cases of that disease in 2018. And I want to highlight polio here for a minute. Polio in 1950, we had over 33,000 new cases of polio in the United States in that 1 year. 33,000 people got polio. You may not know anybody who's ever had polio because we don't see it very much anymore. In fact, in 2018, in the U.S., we had no cases of polio, 0. And the reason we had no cases of polio is because we vaccinate people for polio. Polio is a horrible disease, guys. My cousin had it, okay? She couldn't walk, she was in a wheelchair, and she died early because of polio, a preventable disease. Next slide. I did want to show you, we have 2 globes, one from 1988 and one from 2018. And the dark purple represents countries that still had polio in that year. And as you can see, the U.S. had no cases of polio in 1988, but all of Africa had a huge amount of polio in Asia, a lot in South America. But by 2018, because of global immunizations, we had only 3 countries that had never eradicated polio, and they were Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Nigeria. And the reason that we hadn't eradicated them there was that they had vaccine hesitancy. There was medical misinformation being spread in those countries that vaccines caused sterility. They don't, but the people were scared. They didn't want to be sterile, and so they didn't take the vaccine, and so instead they got polio. All right, next slide. I thought I'd fast forward and show you the global map for polio this month. Remember 2018, we had only 3 countries with polio? What do we have now? Because of huge anti-vaccine campaigns going on, Africa is on fire with polio. And polio has spread to Europe. See it? Europe. And the CDC now, this month, issued a travel warning that says before you go to Europe, you need to make sure you're up to date on your polio vaccine. And they're also recommending that people like me who had the polio vaccine, and many of you will remember this, I waited in line at the fire station with my parents that get the sugar cube, okay? Did anybody have the sugar cube vaccine? I probably need an updated polio vaccine now, especially if I go to Europe. I'm going to take questions at the end if that's okay. All right, next slide. Did you know that vaccines prevent other diseases? All right. Vaccines prevents you from getting the disease they were designed to prevent, but they also can prevent other diseases. We know that we have 2 vaccines that prevent cancer. The hepatitis B vaccine prevents liver cancer and cirrhosis. And the human papillomavirus, HPV virus vaccine, prevents cervical cancer, penile cancer, and throat cancer. We also know that vaccines reduce your risk of getting dementia. Isn't that wonderful? Who doesn't want dementia? Me. I don't want dementia. We have good evidence to suggest that shingles vaccine, pneumococcal vaccine, flu vaccine, and the Tdap vaccine, and that's tetanus, diphtheria, and pertussis vaccines, reduce your risk of getting dementia. So go get your shingles and pneumonia vaccine if you hadn't had it, and hopefully you'll prevent yourself from getting dementia. All right, next slide. All right, this is some statements from the American Medical Association, and it says, vaccines have long been one of our safest and most powerful tools protecting public health. Vaccines save lives not only by protecting the vaccinated individuals, but by preventing the spread of vaccine-preventable diseases among both the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. And it is imperative that we actively counter voices that are deliberately spreading misinformation about vaccines. Right, next slide. I wanted to briefly talk about these 2 individuals. You may recognize at least one of them. The man on the left is Dr. Andrew Wakefield. He was a gastroenterologist, in the UK. And the man on the right is Mr. Robert Kennedy Jr., who is a lawyer and who has never had training in medicine or public health. And these are 2 of the most prominent anti-vaxxers in our country today. And this is a picture of them at an anti-vaccine rally in Washington in 2019. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the stuff they've done. Next slide. All right, remember I told you that the medical misinformation about vaccines cause autism? That is not true. But where that started was that Dr. Andrew Wakefield published a paper in Lancet, a very respected medical journal. And in that paper, he suggested that there was a link between measles vaccine and autism. And he based that paper on a very small case series with only 12 children. Okay, 12, that's tiny. And there was no control group. And we know that you can't establish a causal relationship between a measles vaccine and autism from a case series. So that's impossible to do. All right, but he did it. That's what he published. And after a later investigation, Wakefield was found to have manipulated his data. He fixed the results to make it appear that there was a link between vaccines and autism when there actually was not a link. That's scientific misconduct, guys. That's fraud. And his paper was later retracted from the Lancet for this fraud. It was also found out that Wakefield had a significant undisclosed financial motive. He was funded by lawyers who wanted to sue vaccine manufacturers, and he also held a patent for a rival measles vaccine, and he was trying to produce it. Okay, so he had a financial incentive to publish a paper suggesting that that measles vaccine caused autism. He was later investigated by the UK's General Medical Council, and he was found guilty of serious professional misconduct, and he lost his license to practice medicine. He can no longer practice medicine for this fraud. All right, next slide. Did his anti-vaccine misinformation affect how people got the vaccine in the UK. This is a complicated slide, so let me kind of walk you through it. The bars represent the percent of the population who have taken the measles vaccine in that year, the percent who are vaccinated. And the line represents the number of measles cases in the UK for that year. And you can see the first arrow over here on the left, that's the year he published that fraudulent paper. And after that publication, we start seeing vaccine hesitancy in the population to the point where it dropped to the lowest percent vaccinated in 2004. It was right about 80% only 80% of the population was vaccinated, and that's below herd immunity for measles. And once they got below herd immunity, what do we see? A measles epidemic in the UK because of vaccine hesitancy. Next slide. All right, I do want to let you know that measles has serious complications, getting the measles. We know that 1 in 5 vaccinated people in the US who get measles is hospitalized. And I apologize for all the words being together, because I guess when I sent the slides through the Ethernet, it kind of squished them up. It wasn't that way on my computer. Anyway, 1 in 5 vaccinated people who get measles is hospitalized. 1 out of every 20 children who get measles develops pneumonia, and it is the most common cause of death from measles in young children. It is a shame for any child to die of a vaccine-preventable disease. We also know that 1 in every 1,000 children who get the measles will develop measles encephalitis, and that can lead to serious things like seizures, deafness, and intellectual disability for life. We know that 1 to 3 of every 1,000 children who become infected with measles will die from either a respiratory or a neurologic complication of the virus. And you may not have ever heard of the last thing. It's subacute sclerosing panencephalitis, okay? It's a very rare thing. What happens in that condition is that the measles virus infects your brain, and your body never clears the infection. And it gradually causes demyelination of the nerves in your brain, and it usually develops 7 to 10 years after you've had the measles, and it's fatal. We have no cure for it. We can only prevent it by giving people the measles vaccine. Next slide. This is a statement by the American Academy of Family Physicians, and I just wanted to read a couple of things here. An article linking autism, that's Dr. Wakefield's article, linking autism to the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine was retracted for fraud, but this misinformation persists and has caused long-lasting public health consequences, long-lasting. Multiple subsequent studies have found no causal link between vaccines and autism, but that falsehood persists and causes parental concern to this day. Then the last point is infection with measles, mumps, or rubella causes more severe adverse effects than the MMR vaccine, and the vaccine refusal, we know, is linked to outbreaks of measles and these other infections. Next slide. So there is no the truth is that there is no link between vaccines and autism. Major health organizations such as the World Health Organization and the American Academy of Pediatrics have reviewed that scientific evidence and conclude that vaccines do not cause autism. Unfortunately, after Mr. Kennedy took office as the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services in 2025, he had the CDC change its website to suggest that vaccines cause autism when there is no scientific evidence to suggest that is true. Now, the last point is a quote from Dr. Susan Cressley, who's the president of the American Academy of Pediatrics, and I'd like to read this. Since 1998, independent researchers from 7 countries have conducted more than 40 high-quality studies, not like Dr. Wakefield's, involving more than 5.6 million people, and the conclusion is clear and unambiguous. There is no link between vaccines and autism. Anyone repeating this harmful myth is misinformed and intentionally trying to mislead parents. And I couldn't agree with her more. Next slide. All right, a little bit more about Mr. Kennedy. I told you he was a prominent anti-vaxxer in the country. He's been an anti-vaxxer for quite some time. He founded the Children's Health Defense. It is a nonprofit organization, and it is a leading force in the anti-vaccine movement. It frequently publishes the debunked claim that vaccines cause autism and vaccines in general are harmful. Okay, Mr. Kennedy uses his legal skills, and he, along with a legal law firm, they sue vaccine manufacturers for money. Okay, so Mr. Kennedy has a financial incentive to spread medical misinformation. Next slide. This is a picture of Mr. Kennedy in an anti-vaccine rally. And just so you know, the Children's Health Defense has filed multiple lawsuits against groups such as the American Academy of Pediatrics over fraudulent claims about the safety of vaccines. He also has filed an official petition with the FDA requesting the agency to revoke all licenses for the COVID vaccine. And it's estimated that his total earnings from the Child Health Defense Fund between the years 2017 and 2023 was over $2 million from that nonprofit. Mr. Kennedy has a financial incentive to spread medical misinformation. Next slide. All right, I want to tell you this sad story, and at the very bottom, it's a link to a YouTube video about the Samoan measles outbreak. Very sad. 2 nurses in Samoa, tiny little island in the middle of the Pacific, they were reconstituting the measles vaccine. And for those of you who don't know, the measles vaccine is a powder, comes in a little vial. You take sterile saline, inject it, shake it up, get it to dissolve, and then you inject the vaccine. Instead of putting sterile saline in the vial, they accidentally put a liquid adult muscle relaxer in it. And then they gave it to 2 children who promptly died. They didn't die from measles, the measles vaccine. They died from the muscle relaxer, it was a medical error. The nurses were prosecuted for manslaughter and convicted, are now in prison. But after that, the Children's Health Defense nonprofit took 3 Facebook ads out, and you can see pictures of them on this slide, promoting anti-vaccine messages, okay, in Samoa. It was estimated that about 50% of the population in Samoa saw these Facebook ads, and there was a huge wave of vaccine hesitancy because of them. And after the vaccine levels dropped in 2019, they had a huge measles outbreak of over 5,000 cases. 83 people were killed. Mostly they were children under the age of 5. And the only way they got out of the measles epidemic was they started vaccinating people again. All right, next slide. All right, this is a paper published by a group that did an analysis of Facebook ads and information about vaccines. And what they found was that the majority of the anti-vaccine advertisement comes from two groups: the Children's Health Defense World Mercury Project, founded by Mr. Kennedy, and the Stop Mandatory Vaccination group founded by Larry Cook, who was another prominent anti-vaxxer. And these anti-vaccine Facebook ads heavily target young women and young couples, trying to spread fear about vaccines so you won't get your kids vaccinated. And after they show you the Facebook ad actually asks you for donations to those two organizations. So that's where they get their money, from Facebook ads. And Mr. Kennedy has a financial incentive to spread medical misinformation. He earns money doing this. Next slide. He also earns money by selling anti-vaccine books. He's written two of them, one in 2021 and one in 2023, focusing on the risk of vaccines. This is a picture of Mr. Kennedy during his Senate confirmation in January of 25. And at that committee, he said, "Oh, I support vaccines. I will do nothing as HHS secretary that makes it difficult or discourages people from taking vaccines." Okay? Mr. Kennedy didn't tell the truth at that hearing, I maintain, because he turned around on April of 2025 and said, he falsely stated that the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccines had not been safety tested. That's a lie. They have. It's a lie. And he lied at his Senate confirmation hearing too. Next slide. All right, since he's been at HHS, he has canceled more than $500 million in mRNA vaccine research and terminated 22 ongoing research projects. That's a sad thing. We won't have those new vaccines because they're not testing them because he took away the money. He also canceled $3 million to the World Vaccine Alliance, which has vaccinated more than 1 billion children since its inception in 2000. And it's estimated to have prevented over 17 million deaths worldwide. All right? He canceled that money. He just didn't give it to them. And as in early 2026, the U.S. Congress is trying to move to approve that $300 million back to the Vaccine Alliance. Hopefully, they'll get that done. Next slide. Okay. Since he's been at the Department of Health and Human Services, he canceled the CDC's campaign promoting the flu vaccine. He also told Dr. Peter Marks, who was the director of the FDA vaccine program, that if he didn't resign, he was going to fire him. Now, Dr. Marks is a vaccine expert who had worked at the FDA since 2012. It's a shame that he got fired. He's an expert. Recently, since Dr. Marks got fired, the FDA refused to evaluate data from a new drug application from Moderna about a new mRNA measles vaccine. And they just said, we're not going to look at your data. They're just not going to do it. And they gave no reason for doing that. And data from that clinical trials about that mRNA vaccine indicate that it is more effective than the current measles vaccine. It is a shame that the FDA is doing things like that. We won't have new vaccines because of that kind of behavior. Next slide. All right, since being at the Department of Health and Human Services, Mr. Kennedy fired all the vaccine experts that were on the Vaccine Recommendation Committee at the CDC. And he replaced them with people, some of whom have no medical training and are anti-vaxxers. And then that committee overhauled the childhood vaccination schedule and reduced the number of recommended vaccines for children by a third. And they did that without looking at the scientific evidence of risk and benefit. Let me say that again. They didn't look at the science. They said, we're just going to cut a third of these vaccines because we don't like vaccines. Okay? Just cut them. So the CDC is no longer recommending vaccines for children for COVID-19, influenza, RSV, hepatitis A and B, meningococcal disease, and rotavirus. That's horrible. Just this week, when they did this, medical professional societies actually sued the federal government. The American Academy of Pediatrics, American College of Physicians sued the federal government over this, and the judge just this week put a ruling out after looking at all the evidence, and he said, the vaccine committee that Mr. Kennedy constituted at the CDC was illegally constituted, and the people were unqualified to do what they did, and he said their recommendations should be thrown out. That's just this week. All right, next slide. Okay, I wanted to show you some data from the CDC. This is yearly measles cases by year. This is data as of February 12th, and you can see in early 2000s we had hardly any measles cases. In 2025, we had the biggest measles outbreak in 3 decades, and we're on track to have the same thing this year. In fact, that we had 910 new cases by February 12th. I looked at the data today. That number is up to 1,365. Okay, so if we're on target for that many cases, we'll probably have 6,000, 7,000 cases of measles in the U.S. this year. It's horrible. It's a preventable disease. Next slide. Who gets the measles? Well, both in 25 and 26, it was the people who were unvaccinated. Primarily the people who are unvaccinated are the ones getting measles. Next slide. All right, why should we care about vaccinating kids for respiratory syncytial virus? Well, we know that that vaccine prevents acute bronchitis in children, and that acute bronchitis is the most common reason for hospitalization among children under age 5, and that up to 80,000 children younger than 5 are hospitalized each year due to respiratory syncytial virus. Many of them end up with respiratory failure on a ventilator in the ICU. And we know up to 300 kids die of RSV now while we're vaccinating people. If we stop vaccinating people, these numbers are going to skyrocket. Okay, next slide. I wanted to just touch base on these other diseases that the committee recommended against vaccinating children for. Influenza. The CDC estimates that over 22 million of us get the flu every year. 280,000 of us end up in the hospital, and it kills 12,000 people every year. Flu is a serious preventable disease. Rotavirus, you may not have ever heard of rotavirus. It gives kids watery diarrhea, and it causes about 400,000 doctor visits in kids. It causes more than 200,000 emergency room visits. Up to 70,000 kids are hospitalized with it each year, and up to 60 people die from rotavirus. If we stop vaccinating against rotavirus, these numbers are going to skyrocket, and the doctors, pediatricians' office is going to be filled up. Meningococcal disease. It's not a virus, it's a bacteria. It is the most common infectious cause of death in childhood in developed countries like the U.S. And it's important for us to vaccinate for meningococcal disease. As you can see, we've had reports recently of a meningococcal disease outbreak I think it was in a college. It's important to vaccinate people for that. And we know that children who get chronic hepatitis B who are not vaccinated are at increased risk for cirrhosis and liver cancer. So it's important to keep vaccinating for these diseases. The scientific evidence vastly supports vaccination for these. Next slide. All right, this is some statements from the American Medical Association about the vaccine overhaul from the CDC. And I'll just read the last one. The scientific evidence remains unchanged, and the AMA supports continued access to childhood vaccinations recommended by, not the CDC, but recommended by national medical special societies such as the American Academy of Pediatrics. Next slide. This is a statement from the American Academy of Pediatrics, and they have published their own immunization schedule. I can show you that after the talk if you really want to see it. It's kind of complicated, but they strongly recommend immunization as the safest and most cost-effective way of preventing disease, disability, and death. Next slide. Okay, these 12 other medical societies and health organizations representing over 1 million healthcare providers in the United States don't support what the CDC did. They support the American Academy of Pediatricians vaccination schedule. Next slide. Okay, this is a list on the left of the vaccines that the CDC group that was just deemed this week to be unqualified. They recommend these vaccines. The American Academy of Pediatricians recommends vaccines for 18 diseases, and the ones in red are the ones that the CDC committee threw out. Next slide. All right, Mr. Kennedy has also been very active in his antagonism towards the American Academy of Pediatricians. He has canceled grants to the AAP totaling more than $12 million, saying that those programs don't align with the administration's mission and priorities. Those programs are doing stuff like studying sudden infant death syndrome and promoting and enhancing rural pediatric care. I can't imagine why those wouldn't be supported by our federal government. It was thought that action by the Department of Health and Human Services was abrupt, and it was seen as retaliation against the AAP's criticism of the government's vaccine recommendation. The AAP sued the federal government again, alleging that they violated the protected speech regarding vaccine policy, and a federal judge has ordered the administration to restore the $12 million in funding to AAP. Next slide. All right, let's just shift gears a little bit and talk about spotting medical misinformation. And it's important but tricky skill that it's important for all of us to know about. The first thing that you should do is if you see medical misinformation, stop and think about it. Think about where the source of that information. Think about the date that information is coming out. Check, if you can, the data that they're referencing. You may also want to consider the motive that somebody may have for spreading medical misinformation, particularly if they have a monetary incentive to spread medical misinformation. And a lot of health influencers online who are promoting medical misinformation are also trying to sell you something to treat a disease. You also may want to think about using a fact-checking site if you're still unsure. And lastly, I would find a trusted health professional, a real person who has medical or public health training to help you interpret the latest health information that you see. Next slide. Okay, this is a list of some really good fact-checking sites. I won't read these off, but all of these can help you sort out medical misinformation from true evidence. Next slide. There's also online information that can help you evaluate medical misinformation. Some know the science from the National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health and Evaluating Health Information from Medline Plus. Those are excellent resources. I would recommend them to you. Next slide. All right, I made it in 1 hour, so I will take questions.
Quick question.
Okay.
I know that for polio, when I went to Africa, I needed to get a booster. My question to you is, do you need a booster for measles if you're 60 and above?
Well, right now, the current recommendation for measles vaccines for adults is if you were born in 1957 or later, you needed vaccines. Okay, if you were born in 1956 or earlier, you had the measles. Okay, I was born in 1956, so I had the measles, so I've never had the measles booster. I never had the measles vaccine at all. But if you have had the regular series of measles vaccinations, you won't need a booster. But it's 3 vaccinations, a set of 3 vaccinations for a complete course. All right.
Not to dispute what you just said, but I learned something this year. My sister was going to be a volunteer in the hospital's gift shop, but she needed proof that she was vaccinated with the MMR. So she only had my mother's records, and they wouldn't accept my mother's very detailed records. We were all vaccinated, but it had to be from the doctor's office. So she went to her family physician, who gave her a simple blood test called a titer, and it showed that she did not have any more antibodies for measles, even though she was vaccinated.
But and I will put a caveat on that, that they could measure.
Right, that
there
were
is
measurable.
Right.
So she went ahead and got a booster, but just because you were vaccinated, in this case, did not mean that she had adequate antibodies that would fight the disease had she gotten it.
Your body has this ability to mount a defense with antibodies when you are exposed to a disease. So when you draw somebody's titer, it may be below the limits of the machine's ability to detect. But if you were exposed to that virus, your titer is going to go whoop because your body remembers it. And so that may have been what your sister experienced. They just couldn't measure, they couldn't detect the titers of the antibody on the machine that they were using. Would it hurt to get another measles vaccine? No. It'd be a waste of her money probably to get another measles titer. Is that what you asked? Yeah.
But the titer, I mean, just like you said, that
It was below the detectable limit.
would it hurt people who have already had the vaccine back in the day?
It probably would not hurt you to get a booster. Yep. Another question? Somebody wanted?
Any other questions? All right.
And I'm very much for vaccines. In fact, we actually went and was in a clinical trial for the COVID vaccine during the pandemic. But
Thank you for doing that.
You're welcome. But what do you think is causing such an increase in autism?
You know, we don't know exactly what causes autism, unfortunately. And like I said, papers like Dr. Wakefield's that fraudulently create a link scare people because we don't know what causes autism. And we do know that the way we diagnose autism has changed over the years, and it could, the apparent rise in autism could be we're defining people that we didn't used to define as having autism. So part of it is the definition has changed over time. But we don't really have a good idea of what causes autism right now. But vaccines are not linked to autism by the reputable scientific papers.
Just a general question. We're talking about all these vaccines and whether you've been vaccinated or not. To the best of your knowledge, if you were to get vaccinated on something, all these different vaccines we're talking about right here, if you were to get another vaccine for those, would they hurt you?
Vaccines have been shown to be safe and effective at preventing preventable disease. Does every medicine we have side effects and adverse effects? Yes. Okay. Every time I get my flu vaccine, my arm hurts. Okay. Every time. And I usually develop a headache and achy. I feel achy for a day. That's a side effect of getting the vaccine. It's not the flu. Every medicine we have has side effects. But vaccines have been shown to be safe and effective.
No, I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying at all about vaccines being effective. I'm saying if you don't know if your parents got you vaccinated for something and you got vaccinated, again, is there any vaccines that you're aware of that if you were to get it for a second time, it would be dangerous to you?
I am not aware of a vaccine like that.
Okay.
I have a question. If you think of just some basic idea of if you are 60, 65, what are some basic things that you need to do to have good health, longevity with your life, quality of life? If you had to say 3 or 5 things that everybody should do, what would those be?
Number 1, don't smoke. Number 2, have a normal weight and be physically active. Number 2, 3, get your vaccines. That'd be my top 3.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't have a question, I just want to share something. 1946, the next county over, Cobb County, my 6-year-old brother went to school feeling fine, got home that evening, did not feel well, took him to a doctor didn't know what was going on. But during the night, he got much worse. They took him into the clinic and said, he had polio. And there was a 1-hour lung in Knoxville at the Baptist Hospital. My mother tells a story that she remembers she could see the hospital before he died.
Polio is a terrible disease. Horrible. We can prevent polio if people get vaccinated.
This is off vaccines, but I wanted to ask you a question about statins.
Okay.
What's your feeling on statins?
Statins are recommended for people who have high cholesterol or high bad cholesterol, the LDL. They are very effective at preventing cardiovascular disease. If your physician recommends that you take them, I would strongly consider it. And you also need to eat a low-fat diet if you have high cholesterol. Don't follow Mr. Kennedy's diet recommendations to eat butter and steak. Because that's what he's recommended since he's been at the Department of Health and Human Services. Butter and steak. Don't eat butter.
On one of your slides, you listed several vaccinations that stated, I don't want to state it the wrong way, about I mean, my family has a history of dementia, but those vaccinations would help.
Reduce your risk of dementia.
Okay, can you explain how they do that?
What we think is happening now is we think that getting those diseases causes chronic inflammation, and chronic inflammation has been linked to an increased risk of dementia, and by not getting the disease, you're lowering your inflammatory profile.
Got a question over here?
It's on vaccines again. Okay, so you had thought that perhaps you didn't need to get a second vaccine, that the antibodies would rally when exposed to whatever illness you could.
In most people who are not immunocompromised,
Right.
and that would
Okay.
probably be most people here.
So I'm thinking about the shingles vaccine. Originally, they had one that was a live virus vaccine. Now they have Shingrix, I guess that's 2 shots, but it's not the live virus. Would it be safe to go ahead and get that second vaccine?
You know, I would talk to your doctor about individual health recommendations because I don't know your health medical history, so it's hard to make individual recommendations. So I would talk to your doctor and see what they recommend. But shingles, the shingles virus, you know, we all had chicken pox. Most of us had chicken pox in my age cohort. And the shingles vaccine that causes chicken pox continues to live in your body. And when we get older and our immune system weakens, sometimes it breaks out, and that's when you get shingles. And so what the shingles vaccine is doing is telling your body to develop new antibodies to that virus so that if it does pop out, you won't get very painful shingles.
Got a question in the center?
I have a quick question. 5 years ago, I had a CAR T cell transplant, and it got rid of all my immunizations. And I've gotten all my shots, but the one that I haven't been able to get is the polio. Where would I go to get it as an adult?
Your doctor may have it at their office.
They don't.
Often places like Walgreens or CVS will have it. Now that the CDC has recommended people get the polio vaccine for travel, I suspect you'll see companies start to carry it. And so I would go into maybe a CVS or Walgreens or Walmart and say, I want a polio vaccine.
I've done that,
And they can order them.
Have you gone to the Knox County Health Department, because that's where we got ours?
Okay, I went to Loudon.
Okay. Knox County, we got ours before we went to Zimbabwe.
Other questions?
I'm going to talk to Courtney later about statins. I'm disclaimer here. I'm a physician.
I'm a big fan of statins.
Me too. So I figured out that I was probably 2 years behind you at Memphis. So I'm going to ask you. I've got a favorite podcast that I listen to. Alan Alda puts on one about talking science, and he always ends it with several questions. And one that I love to hear the answers from very smart people who struggle with this all the time is, how do you tell someone they have their facts wrong? So I'm asking you,
How
do you tell someone they have their facts wrong? Tell me how to do that as a physician, but I think it's important for us when we're having conversations.
I think it's important to listen to what they have to say and ask them where they got that information from, and then try to show them actual data from reputable studies that suggest perhaps the alternate message. But sometimes you can't convince people. I mean, they get a fixed false belief in their head and they're not going to give it up. But the best you can do is show them actual scientific data that's not from retracted papers like Dr. Wakefield's paper. Sometimes that helps.
All right.
So, speaking specifically about the flu vaccine that is promoted every year, it's been my experience. I've had the flu vaccine twice, and I'm hoping you can explain to everyone here why it's important to have a flu vaccine every year. 'Cause it seems like it's always a year late, if you will, the vaccine itself. But I've had the flu vaccine twice in my life.
And you got the flu.
I'm sorry?
And you got the flu.
No, within 30 days, I had the worst case of pneumonia in my life, both times. So I don't understand why the flu vaccine is so important. I mean, I've gotten sick. I'm 100%. I got pneumonia. So maybe
Yeah.
you can explain why it's important to have the flu vaccine.
The flu virus mutates all the time. A lot of viruses mutate. In fact, during COVID, every 3 months we had a new variant. It was the most exacerbating thing to try to follow as a provider. But viruses mutate all the time. And every year, the vaccine experts try to guess what the next variant will be in the flu season. And some years, they have a better guess at it of what the common variants will be, and sometimes they miss, okay? And that's why we have to get a flu vaccine every year, because the variants change every year, just like COVID. That's why it's currently recommended to get COVID vaccines every year, because the COVID that mutates faster than I can blink. Getting your updated COVID vaccines, keeping up with the new variants. And I don't know why you got pneumonia after the flu vaccine. I would guess that it was probably not related, but that would be, the flu vaccine is not known to cause pneumonia.
Just a quick question. I know you had a slide for this, but I can't remember it. If you had to say source material, if you had 3 sites that you would go to find what facts are true, what would those 3 sites be?
I would start out with the professional medical societies. Typically, they will have really good recommendations. State health departments often have good information about health. Then Medline Plus was a good place. They have a fact checker to help you sort out medical misinformation from not. What we can do, if you want to, is share those links with everybody. I probably need to clean up those slides, though, where all the words ran together after they floated through the ether. I think we should give those out if people are interested in them.
Okay.
Okay, you talked about the COVID vaccine. There's been, there's really no recommendation anymore, so I wasn't sure if we were supposed to get it every 6 months or every year.
Every year.
Just every year is okay.
Can you advance the slides? Because I didn't show you these slides, but I had them, and it's the American Academy of Pediatrics childhood vaccine recommendations. Advance the slide. Okay. And the reason I didn't show you it is because it looks like this. It's very complicated, and nobody can read this slide. So I would recommend that you talk to the pediatricians about those vaccines. Keep advancing the slides. This is childhood immunizations. Advance it, childhood immunization information. Next, this is the American College of Physicians, American Academy of Family Physicians, and the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecologists recommendations for adults. Advance the slide. This one's about as bad as the kids one, not quite as bad, but this is online. If you go to the American College of Physicians and say vaccine recommendations, it's all there. That's the slide. Here's some more vaccine recommendations for adults. And it depends on what your health condition. Advance the slides. One more. That's more information for adults about vaccines. So,
Is it possible if we could take your slides and make them available for anybody who would like to? Would that be
Yeah.
all right? Okay.
be happy to do that.
So we'll do that, and we'll get that out to you by the end of the week. How about that? Any final questions before we wrap up? If not, let's thank Karen Johnson for coming and speaking tonight. Thank you very much.
I hope it was interesting.
Very informative. Thank you for coming. Thanks, everybody, for coming.